Dr. Jake Wilson had always been fascinated by aliens. Not the scary kind from movies, but real ones. It's a friendly type who lived peacefully on distant planets and had their own cultures and traditions. For the past 5 years, Jake had been working as a space scientist at the Earth Space Research Center, studying different alien species and how they lived their lives. Jake was 32 years old, tall with messy brown hair that he never seemed to comb properly. He wore thick glasses and always carried a notebook filled with drawings of alien creatures and their customs. His colleagues often joked that Jake knew more about alien traditions than human ones, which was probably true since he had never been married and rarely attended parties on Earth. His favorite research project involved studying a peaceful alien race called the Zephyrians. These beings looked somewhat like humans but were taller and had skin that changed colors based on their emotions. When they were happy, their skin glowed with soft golden light. When sad, it turned a gentle blue. Jake found this absolutely amazing and had written dozens of research papers about their society. The Zephyrians lived on a beautiful planet called Zephyr Prime, which was about 3 days away from Earth if you traveled by the fastest spaceships. Their cities were made of living crystals that sang beautiful melodies when the wind blew through them. Jake had visited their planet several times for his research and had made many friends there. His closest friend among the Zephyrians was a female scientist named Kiravi. She was brilliant, kind, and had helped Jake understand many complex aspects of Zephyrian culture. Kiravi had golden skin that sparkled when she laughed, which happened quite often since Jake's attempts to speak the Zephyrian language usually resulted in hilarious mistakes. One ordinary Tuesday morning, as Jake sat in a small office reviewing his latest research notes, Kiravi appeared at his door. She wasn't physically there, of course, but appeared as a shimmering hologram through the advanced communication system that connected Earth to Zephyr Prime. "Greetings, friend Jake," she said in her melodic voice, her skin glowing with excitement. "I bring wonderful news that will make your heart sing with joy." Jake looked up from his papers, adjusting his glasses. "Hey, Kiravi, what's got you so excited? Did you discover a new crystal formation?" Kiravi giggled, her skin sparkling brighter. "Something much more special than crystals, my friend. I have brought you an invitation to the most sacred ceremony in all of Zephyrian history." She held up what looked like a beautiful crystal tablet that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within its surface. The tablet pulsed with soft, colorful light, and Jake could hear faint musical notes emanating from it. "This," Kiravi announced, "proudly is an invitation to the grand celestial bonding of my dear sister, Liarana. It is the most important ceremony in our culture, and you would be the first human ever invited to witness this sacred ritual." Jake's eyes widened behind his glasses. "Really? The first human ever? But why me?" "Because," Kiravi explained, her skin shifting to a warm orange color that indicated deep respect, "you have shown such genuine interest in our ways. You have learned our customs, respected our traditions, and treated our people with kindness. The Council of Elders believes that your presence at this ceremony would honor both our species." Jake felt overwhelmed. In all his years of studying alien cultures, he had never imagined being invited to participate in such an important event. Most humans were lucky to get a simple tour of an alien city, let alone an invitation to a sacred ceremony. "I'm incredibly honored," Jake said, his voice filled with emotion. "When is this ceremony taking place?" "In 1 month's time," Kiravi replied. "This will give you enough time to prepare properly. The ceremony requires specific knowledge of our customs, traditional clothing, and appropriate behavior for honored guests." Over the next few weeks, Jake threw himself into preparation with the enthusiasm of a student studying for the most important exam of his life. He spent hours each day learning about Zephyrian wedding traditions, practicing the proper way to bow, and memorizing phrases in the ancient Zephyrian language that guests were expected to recite. Kiravi sent him detailed instructions about everything from what colors he should wear to how he should position his hands during different parts of the ceremony. She explained that Zephyrian weddings were incredibly complex events that could last for several days and involve the entire community. "The grand celestial bonding is not like human weddings," she told him during one of their preparation sessions. "It is a celebration that brings together all aspects of our society. There will be hundreds of participants, each playing a specific role in the ceremony. Jake practiced traditional Zephyrian meditation techniques, learned songs that guests were expected to sing, and even studied the proper way to eat Zephyrian ceremonial food without offending anyone. He bought special ceremonial robes that Kiravi had recommended and practiced walking in them since they were much longer and more flowing than human clothing. As the departure date approached, Jake became increasingly excited and nervous. Had attended many human weddings before, but this was completely different. Everything had to be perfect. He couldn't afford to accidentally insult an entire alien species by making a cultural mistake. 3 days before the ceremony, Jake boarded the spaceship that would take him to Zephyr Prime. The journey through hyperspace was breathtaking, with stars streaking past the windows like colorful ribbons. Jake spent most of the trip reviewing his notes and practicing Zephyrian greetings in front of the mirror in his small cabin. When the ship finally arrived at Zephyr Prime, Jake pressed his face against the window and gasped. The planet was even more beautiful than he remembered. The crystal cities sparkled like jewels against the purple sky, and he could see thousands of Zephyrians moving through the streets, all heading toward the capital city of Luminara, where the ceremony would take place. As Jake stepped off the spaceship, he noticed something unusual. Every Zephyrian he passed seemed to be staring at him with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. Their skin colors were shifting rapidly between gold and silver, which he knew indicated extreme emotions, though he couldn't quite figure out what kind. They must be excited to see the first human guest, he thought to himself as he made his way to the special accommodation that had been prepared for him. The building where he would stay was magnificent, carved from a single massive crystal that hummed with gentle vibrations. His room was larger and more luxurious than anything he had ever experienced, with walls that showed moving pictures of beautiful Zephyrian landscapes and a bed that seemed to float in midair. That evening, as Jake prepared for the ceremony that would begin the next morning, he looked out his window at the bustling city below. Thousands of Zephyrians were arriving from all corners of the planet, and he could see elaborate decorations being hung between the crystal spires. The excitement in the air was almost tangible. Jake felt a mixture of pride and nervousness as he realized that tomorrow he would make history as the first human to witness one of the most sacred ceremonies in Zephyrian culture. He had no idea that he was about to become much more than just a witness, and that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. Jake woke up before dawn on the day of the ceremony, his stomach churning with excitement and nerves. He had barely slept, going over all the customs and traditions he had studied for weeks. Today was the big day, and he was determined not to mess anything up. After a quick breakfast of strange but delicious Zephyrian fruits that tasted like a mix of strawberries and starlight, Jake put on his ceremonial robes. The fabric felt smooth and cool against his skin, and it seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. When he looked in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself. He looked like he belonged in some ancient space fairy tale. Kiravi arrived at his room just as the first of Zephyr Prime's 3 suns began to rise. Her skin was glowing a brilliant gold, brighter than Jake had ever seen it before. "Are you ready, honored friend?" she asked, though her voice seemed a bit shaky with emotion. "As ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied, adjusting his robes nervously. "I've been practicing the guest blessing words all morning," Kiravi smiled, but Jake noticed something odd in her expression. It looked almost like she was trying not to cry, though he couldn't understand why she would be sad on such a happy occasion. Together, they walked through the crystal streets toward the Grand Temple of Eternal Bonds. The temple was absolutely massive, bigger than any building Jake had ever seen on Earth. It looked like it had been carved from a single enormous crystal that reached up toward the sky, like a mountain made of rainbow-colored glass. As they approached the temple, Jake saw thousands of Zephyrians streaming toward the entrance. What struck him as unusual was that almost all of them were women. They were dressed in flowing robes similar to his own, but in different colors that seemed to shift and change as they moved. "Wow," Jake whispered to Kiravi. "I didn't realize so many people would be attending. This must be even more important than I thought." Kiravi nodded quickly, her skin flickering between gold and silver. "Yes, very important. Ceremony and generations. Inside the temple, Jake gasped at the incredible sight before him. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with gentle light. The ceiling was so high it seemed to disappear into space itself. Harmonic vibrations filled the air, creating the most beautiful music Jake had ever heard. An attendant, a tall Zephyrian woman with skin like polished silver, approached them and spoke to Kirove in rapid Zephyrian. Jake caught a few words, but they were speaking too fast for him to follow completely. "She will show you to your place," Kirove explained. "I must go prepare for my own role in the ceremony." Jake followed the attendant through the temple, amazed by everything he saw. Hundreds of Zephyrian women were taking their places in circular formations around the temple floor. Each section seemed organized by age, with younger women toward the center and older ones forming outer circles. To his surprise, the attendant led him not to a section with other spectators, but to a raised platform near the very center of the temple. There was a beautiful crystal chair waiting for him, decorated with flowers and glowing gems. "This seems like a very important seat," Jake thought to himself as he sat down. "They really are treating me like royalty." As more Zephyrians entered the temple, Jake noticed that many of them kept glancing in his direction. Their skin colors were shifting rapidly between different shades, which he knew meant they were experiencing strong emotions. Some looked excited, others seemed nervous, and a few appeared to be whispering to each other while looking at him. "I guess they've never seen a human at one of these ceremonies before," Jake reasoned, trying to ignore the attention. The ceremony began when the temple's crystal walls suddenly blazed with brilliant light, and the harmonic music grew louder and more complex. From the main entrance, a procession of elderly Zephyrians entered, wearing robes covered in what looked like actual starlight. Leading the procession was an ancient Zephyrian woman who was clearly someone very important. Her skin was pure white like fresh snow, and she moved with a grace that made her seem like she was floating rather than walking. This had to be the high priestess that Kirove had told him about. Behind the priestess came the bride, Liarana, Kirove's sister. She was absolutely stunning, wearing a crown that seemed to be made of captured starlight and a robe that flowed around her like liquid moonbeams. But what puzzled Jake was that she kept looking directly at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. As the procession moved through the temple, attendants began placing garlands of beautiful flowers around Jake's neck. The flowers smelled like cinnamon and ocean breezes, and they felt warm against his skin. This must be part of honoring the special guest, Jake thought, feeling pleased that they were treating him so well. The high priestess began chanting. In the ancient Zephyrian language, her voice echoing throughout the crystal chamber, Jake activated his translation device, a small gadget he wore behind his ear that helped him understand alien languages. As the chanting continued, Jake began to feel confused. The words the translator was feeding him didn't sound like typical wedding ceremony language. Instead of talking about the bride and groom's love, the priestess seemed to be talking about the chosen one and the bridge between worlds and the one who will unite us all. Jake looked around the temple more carefully and realized something that made his heart skip a beat. He couldn't see a groom anywhere. In all the wedding ceremonies he had studied, there was supposed to be a male Zephyrian who would bond with the bride. But looking around the entire temple, Jake realized he was the only male present. "That's weird," he whispered to himself. "Where is the groom?" The ceremony continued, with more attendants approaching Jake to place additional ceremonial items around him.
Oh.
They draped a beautiful sash across his chest and placed rings on his fingers. Each time they added something new, the crowd of Zephyrian women would make soft singing sounds that filled the air with harmony. The translation device continued feeding him puzzling phrases. The high priestess was now talking about sacred bonds, an eternal commitment, and the one who will care for all. Jake's confusion grew deeper with each passing minute. Then something happened that made Jake's blood run cold. The high priestess turned toward him and began walking in his direction, still chanting. As she approached, Jake's translation device picked up words that made him realize something was terribly wrong. "The bonded one sits before us," the priestess chanted. "The chosen one who will unite with all the daughters of Zephyr." Jake's eyes widened in horror as the terrible truth began to dawn on him. He looked around the temple again, counting the hundreds of Zephyrian women surrounding him, all looking at him with expectant faces. "Oh no," he whispered, his hands starting to shake. "Oh no, no, no. This can't be what I think it is." The high priestess was now standing directly in front of him, smiling kindly but with an expression that suggested there was no turning back from whatever was about to happen. Jake's mind raced as he tried to understand how he had gotten himself into this situation. He had come here as a guest to watch a wedding, but somehow it seemed like he might have accidentally become the groom. And not just to one bride, but to every single woman in the temple. As the realization hit him, Jake felt like he might faint. This was definitely not what he had signed up for when he accepted that beautiful crystal invitation. Jake sat frozen in his crystal chair, his heart pounding so loud he was sure everyone in the temple could hear it. The high priestess stood before him with a gentle smile that somehow made everything worse. Her snow-white skin glowed with ancient wisdom, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly throughout the massive temple. "Welcome, honored one from the distant world of Earth," she said. And Jake nearly fell off his chair when he realized she was speaking perfect English. "We have waited long for this blessed day, you... You speak English?" Jake stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "But I thought..." The high priestess chuckled softly, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Of course, dear child. Did you think we would invite someone to such an important ceremony without learning to communicate properly with them?" Jake's mind reeled. If she could speak English all along, then why had everyone been speaking Zephyrian around him? Why did he need the translation device? Unless they wanted him to hear specific things and not others. "I don't understand," Jake said, his voice small and confused. "I thought I was here to watch Lyrena's wedding. As a guest. Where's the groom?" The high priestess's expression grew even kinder, which somehow made Jake even more nervous. "Why?" "Sweet child of Earth, you misunderstand our ways, but that is not your fault. Our customs are very different from yours." She gestured to the hundreds of Zephyrian women surrounding them, all watching with glowing skin and expectant faces. "This is indeed Lyrena's bonding ceremony, but in our tradition, it is not what you humans call a wedding between two people." Jake felt his stomach drop into his boots. "Then what is it?" "It is a collective bonding," the high priestess explained patiently. "The most sacred ceremony in all of Zephyrian culture. When our people face great challenges, when our future is uncertain, we perform this ancient ritual to ensure the survival and prosperity of our species." "I still don't understand what that has to do with me," Jake said, though deep down he was starting to get a terrible idea of where this was going. The high priestess placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Jake Wilson of Earth, you have been chosen to become the bonded one, the mate to all the daughters of Zephyr who have chosen to participate in this sacred ceremony." The words hit Jake like a meteor crashing into a planet. He stared at the high priestess, then at the hundreds of women around him, then back at the high priestess. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. "All of them?" he finally squeaked. "All of them want to."
"Will you marry me?"
At that moment, Kirave appeared beside the high priestess, her skin shifting rapidly between gold and blue, showing her emotional turmoil. Tears that sparkled like diamonds were rolling down her cheeks. "Jake, my dear friend," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry we could not tell you the truth from the beginning, but our laws forbid us from explaining the ceremony until it has begun." Jake turned to look at his friend, feeling betrayed and confused. "You knew? You knew this whole time that I wasn't coming here as a guest?" Kiravi nodded sadly. "For months, our scientists have been studying the genetic samples you provided for your research. We discovered something remarkable, something that could save our entire species." "What are you talking about?" Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. The high priestess stepped forward again. "Our people are facing a crisis, Jake. Our population has been declining for generations. We need genetic diversity to survive, and your DNA is perfectly compatible with ours. More than compatible, it could strengthen our species for centuries to come." Jake looked around the temple at all the faces watching him. Some of the women looked nervous, others excited, and many seemed hopeful. He recognized several faces from his research visits to Zephyr Prime. There was Zaralel, the crystal engineer who had shown him around the power facilities. There was Luna Ko, the artist, who had painted beautiful pictures of Earth based on his descriptions. There was Novithi, the teacher who had helped him learn proper Zephyrian pronunciation. You all knew, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. Every time I visited, every conversation we had, every moment we spent together, you were all evaluating me like some kind of ... of breeding animal. Kiravi stepped closer, her skin now a deep purple that indicated shame and regret. No, Jake, it was not like that. Yes, we were studying you, but we also grew to care for you as a person. Each woman here chose to participate in this ceremony because she genuinely likes and respects you. But you lied to me, Jake said, standing up from his chair. The ceremonial garlands around his neck suddenly felt heavy as chains. You all lied to me for months. You made me believe I was coming here as an honored guest, when really you were planning to ... He couldn't even finish the sentence. The enormity of the situation was overwhelming. He had come to witness a simple wedding and somehow ended up as the groom to nearly 1,000 alien women. The ceremony cannot be stopped now that it has begun, the high priestess said gently, but firmly. To do so would bring great shame upon all these women and could destabilize our entire society. They have all committed themselves to this bonding in front of our most sacred witnesses. Jake felt trapped, like a small animal caught in a cage. He looked toward the temple entrance, calculating if he could make a run for it. But even if he could escape the temple, where would he go? He was on an alien planet 3 days from Earth, surrounded by people who had been planning this for months. What if I say no? Jake asked desperately. What if I refuse? The high priestess's expression grew sad. Then you would create a diplomatic crisis between our worlds. These women would be dishonored, unable to ever participate in another bonding ceremony. Many would never have families of their own. And the alliance between Earth and Zephyr Prime, which took decades to build, would likely crumble. Jake felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. It wasn't just about him anymore. His decision would affect the lives of hundreds of women, the relationship between 2 entire species, and possibly the future of the Zephyrian race. He looked around the temple one more time, seeing all those hopeful faces watching him. Some of the women were crying now, probably afraid he would reject them. Others looked determined, ready to accept whatever decision he made. This is insane, Jake muttered to himself. This is absolutely insane. But as he stood there, surrounded by the most important decision of his life, Jake realized that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this situation than he first understood. Maybe this wasn't the disaster he thought it was. Maybe it was something else entirely. The question was, did he have the courage to find out what that something else might be? Jake stood in the center of the crystal temple, feeling like the entire universe was waiting for his answer. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft harmonic humming of the living crystal walls. Hundreds of Zephyrian women watched, him with glowing skin that shifted between hope and fear.
Taking a deep breath, Jake made a decision that surprised even himself.
Instead of running away or getting angry, he decided to really listen and understand what was happening. Okay, he said quietly to the high priestess, I need to understand this better. Can you explain exactly what this bonding means?
Not the
Ceremony part, but what it would mean for my life, for their lives, for everyone involved? The high priestess smiled, her white skin glowing brighter with approval. Wisdom in the face of confusion is the mark of a true leader. Yes, child, I will explain everything. She gestured for Jake to sit back down, and the women in the temple seemed to relax slightly, their skin colors stabilizing into calmer shades. First, you must understand that Zephyrian bonding is not like human marriage, the high priestess began. We do not expect you to live with all these women as a human husband would live with one wife. That would be impossible and overwhelming for anyone. Jake felt a tiny bit of relief. Then what exactly would be expected of me? The collective bonding creates a spiritual and emotional connection between you and each woman who chooses to participate. You would become their protector, their advisor, and their friend. Some relationships might grow deeper over time. Others might remain as friendships. Each bond would develop naturally according to the personalities involved. Kirave stepped forward, her skin now a gentle blue that indicated calm explanation. Jake, remember how you felt when you first learned about our culture?
You what?
To help us, to understand us, to bridge the gap between our species. This bonding would allow you to do exactly that, but in a much deeper way. Jake looked around at the faces surrounding him. Many of these women had become his friends during his research visits. He had shared meals with them, learned from them, and genuinely enjoyed their company. But why me, he asked. Surely there are other humans who would be better suited for something like this. A woman Jake recognized as Dr. Vera Nye, brilliant physicist he had worked with on several research projects, stepped forward. Her skin glowed with gentle golden light as she spoke. Jake, for over a year, our Council of Elders studied many humans. We looked at scientists, diplomats, leaders, and teachers. You were different from all the others. How so? Jake asked, genuinely curious. You never treated us like exotic creatures to be studied, another woman said. As Arielu, a young engineer who had shown him how their crystal technology worked, you treated us like friends, like equals. You learned our language not to impress others, but because you genuinely wanted to communicate with us better. More women began to speak up, sharing their memories of interactions with Jake. You helped my daughter with her homework when you visited our school, said Taribo, a teacher whose skin glowed with warm appreciation. You didn't have to do that, but you spent hours helping her understand Earth mathematics. When my crystal garden was damaged in the storm, you stayed up. All night helping me repair it, added Noraki, an elderly gardener. Your hands got cut from handling the sharp crystal fragments, but you didn't complain once. You always remembered our names, our interests, our families, said Liriso, a young artist. Most visitors just see us as a group, but you saw us. As individuals, as Jake listened to these women share their memories, he began to understand something important. This wasn't just about genetics or species survival. These women had genuinely grown to care about him as a person, and he realized he cared about them too. The bonding would create a telepathic connection, the High Priestess explained further. You would be able to sense if any of your bonded partners were in distress, and they would be able to feel your general emotional state. It's not mind reading, but more like it's knowing when a close friend is sad or happy, even from far away. Jake thought about this. It sounded both amazing and terrifying. What about my life on Earth? My work? My research? Nothing would have to change about your current life, Kiravai assured him. You could continue your research, travel between worlds, live wherever you choose. The bonding simply means you would have a spiritual family here on Zephyr Prime who would always welcome you home. And what happens to them if I say no? Jake asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. The High Priestess's expression grew sad. These women have spent months preparing for this ceremony. They have opened their hearts and committed their futures to this bonding. If you refuse now, they would be considered unbondable by our society. They would never be allowed to participate in another ceremony like this. Many would never have families of their own. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility. It wasn't just about him anymore. His decision would affect the entire future of hundreds of women who had done nothing wrong except hope for a chance at happiness and family. Can I talk to some of them individually? Jake asked. I mean, if I'm going to make this decision, shouldn't I understand what each person is hoping for from this bonding? The High Priestess nodded approvingly. Wisdom again. Yes, that would be appropriate. Over the next hour, Jake spoke with dozens of the women. Some were scientists who hoped to collaborate on research projects that could benefit both species. Others were artists who wanted to create beautiful things that combined human and Zephyrian cultures. Some were teachers who dreamed of starting schools where human and Zephyrian children could learn together. A few were simply lonely and hoped to find companionship and friendship. Others were adventurous souls who wanted to explore the galaxy and thought having a human partner would open up new possibilities for travel and discovery. What struck Jake most was that none of them seemed to have unrealistic expectations. They understood that he was one person, and they were many. They weren't expecting him to be a traditional husband to all of them. They were hoping for connection, friendship, and the chance to build something new and wonderful together. As Jake talked with more and more of the women, he began to realize something that surprised him. This wasn't the disaster he had first thought it was. It was actually an incredible opportunity to do something that had never been done before in the history of either species. He could become a bridge between two worlds. He could help create a new kind of family, a new kind of relationship, new kind of future that neither species had ever imagined before. Standing up in the center of the temple, Jake looked around at all the hopeful faces surrounding him. His heart was still racing, but now it was with excitement rather than fear. "I have one more question," he said to the High Priestess. "If I agree to this bonding, will I be able to help create a better future for both our species?" The High Priestess smiled, her skin glowing with pure joy. "Oh, child of Earth, you would be able to create a future beyond anyone's wildest dreams." Jake took a deep breath and made his choice. Jake looked around the magnificent crystal temple one last time as a single man, then smiled at the High Priestess. "I accept the bonding," he said, his voice strong and clear. "I want to help create this new future you're talking about." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The crystal walls of the temple began glowing brighter, resonating with harmonic music that seemed to come from the very heart of the planet itself. The hundreds of Zephyrian women erupted in joyful celebration, their skin lighting up in brilliant colors that painted the entire temple in shifting rainbows of gold, silver, and crystal bright white. The High Priestess raised her hands, and the celebration quieted to reverent attention. "Then let the sacred bonding begin," she announced in a voice that echoed with ancient power. What followed was the most beautiful ceremony Jake had ever witnessed. Each woman approached him individually, placing a small crystal containing what the High Priestess explained was a piece of her spiritual essence into a special pendant that Jake would wear around his neck. As each crystal was added, Jake felt a warm sensation, like making a new friend, but much deeper and more profound. The strange thing was, it didn't feel overwhelming like he had feared. Instead, it felt like his heart was expanding, making room for all these new connections. When Kiravi placed her crystal in the pendant, Jake felt a rush of the friendship and respect they had built over years of working together. When Dr. Varanai added hers, he sensed her brilliant scientific mind and her excitement about future research projects. As the ceremony continued, Jake began to understand what the High Priestess had meant about the telepathic connection. He wasn't reading anyone's thoughts, but he could sense the general emotional state of each woman as she bonded with him. Most felt joy and hope, some felt nervous excitement, and a few felt a deep contentment, like they had finally found where they belonged. The ceremony took several hours, and by the time it was complete, Jake felt fundamentally changed. Not in a bad way, but like he had become a bigger version of himself. He was still Jake Wilson, the curious scientist from Earth, but now he was also something new, a bridge between two worlds, protector and friend to hundreds of remarkable women, and a pioneer in the most unique relationship experiment in galactic history. In the weeks that followed, Jake discovered that his new life was nothing like what he had feared and everything he had never dared to hope for. The bonding didn't chain him down or overwhelm him with impossible responsibilities. It did. Opened up opportunities he had never imagined. Some of his bonded partners became research collaborators, working with him on projects that combined human and Zephyrian knowledge in ways that benefited both species. Dr. Varanai helped him develop new space travel technologies that could cut journey times between planets in half. Aryalu worked with him to create crystal computers that could solve complex problems in minutes instead of months. Others became close friends who enriched his life in countless ways. Terabo taught him advanced Zephyrian philosophy, opening his mind to new ways of thinking about the universe. Liraso created beautiful artworks that told the story of the bonding ceremony, making Jake famous throughout the galaxy as the human who dared to bridge two worlds. Few of the women developed deeper romantic connections with Jake, and with their permission and encouragement, he built special relationships with them. But even these deeper bonds were nothing like traditional human marriage. They were partnerships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection rather than possessive love. Jake established a routine that worked perfectly for it, his new life. He spent half his time on Earth, continuing his research and serving as an ambassador between the two species. The other half he spent on Zephyr Prime, working with his bonded partners on various projects and simply enjoying their company. The telepathic connection turned out to be one of the most wonderful aspects of the bonding. Whenever Jake felt lonely or stressed, he could sense the warm presence of his Zephyrian family, knowing they were there for him no matter where he was in the galaxy. When one of them faced challenges or difficulties, Jake could offer support and encouragement across the vast distances of space. 6 months after the ceremony, Jake made a discovery that explained why the bonding had been so important to the Zephyrian people. Several of his bonded partners were expecting children, the first Zephyrian human hybrid babies in history. Doctors on both Earth and Zephyr Prime were amazed by how healthy and strong these babies appeared to be. But the real surprise came when Jake learned the truth about how he had been chosen for the bonding. During a quiet dinner with Kira, she finally revealed the secret that had been kept from him for so long. "Jake," she said, her skin glowing with gentle amusement, "do you remember when you first applied to study our species 5 years ago?" "Of course," Jake replied. "It was the opportunity of a lifetime." Kira smiled. "The application process wasn't just about your scientific qualifications. Our Council of Elders had been secretly searching for the right human partner for the bonding ceremony for over 10 years. When your application came in, they knew immediately that you were the one they had been looking for." Jake nearly choked on his crystalline fruit juice. The whole thing was planned from the very beginning. "Not the bonding itself," Kira explained quickly. "That was a real emergency. Our population crisis was genuine. But the Council had been preparing for the possibility that such a ceremony might become necessary. They needed to find a human who could handle the responsibility with wisdom and kindness." "And you've been testing me this whole time?" Jake asked, not sure whether to be annoyed or impressed. "Observing, not testing," Kira corrected. "Everything you did was genuine, Jake. Your kindness, your curiosity, your respect for our culture, none of that was fake. I simply recognized those qualities and knew you would be perfect for this role." Jake laughed, shaking his head in amazement. "So I was never really an accidental groom. I was always meant to be here. The universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time," Kira said wisely. As Jake reflected on his incredible journey from confused wedding guest to interstellar family man, he realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected situations. He had come to Zephyr Prime thinking he was just going to watch a simple wedding ceremony. Instead, he had found his true purpose in life. Looking up at the 3 moons of Zephyr Prime shining through the crystal window, Jake felt a deep sense of contentment and excitement for the future. Tomorrow, he would continue his work helping to build bridges between Earth and Zephyr Prime. Next week, he would attend the birth of the first hybrid babies. Next month, he would help establish the first joint human-Cepharian research station. The accidental groom had become exactly what both species needed, a symbol of cooperation, understanding, and hope for a future where different worlds could come together to create something beautiful and new. And as Jake drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the warm presence of his extended family across the telepathic bond, he smiled knowing that his greatest adventure was just beginning.